I knew something was off when I walked into the Monday sync and my name wasn't on the agenda. Again, third week in a row, no updates, no questions. Just Nathan steamrolling through slide decks like a discount cruise director with too much hair gel and not enough self-awareness. I sat there, sipping lukewarm coffee from my chipped world's okayest strategist mug, pretending not to notice that the Sable Enterprises update, my account, my pitch, my relationship, is being attributed to general team efforts, which is corporate for we're stealing your baby, Aaron, but please smile for the group photo. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he really did think I was overloaded. Maybe those temporary reallocations were actually temporary. But then he started referring to my original proposal deck as a legacy document. As in, we've moved on from that legacy doc Aaron put together. Like I was a ghost haunting my own project. And ghosts don't get invited to pitch meetings. I found out the Sable strategy call had happened after it ended. The calendar invite went out, just not to me. The kicker? He used my deck. The one with the blue border, the side note about Sable's CTO's obsession with modular design systems, the market segmentation flow I built from scratch. It was unmistakable. A junior analyst even pinged me on Slack to say, "Nice deck today." Nate crushed it. He crushed it with my blood, sweat, and perfectly kerned typography. If you're still here, listening to this, I'll pause for a second to ask something quick. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, maybe even a like. 90% of folks never do, and honestly, it keeps this little revenge machine going. It's the corporate version of a high five after slapping a fraud into the next fiscal quarter. Anyway, at first I thought maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe Nathan really is just trying to streamline. But when I asked him about it directly, he chuckled. Said something like, "You're so detail-oriented, Aaron, but I think you might be too close to the project. It's good to get fresh eyes on it, you understand." And he patted my shoulder like I was some intern who brought the wrong coffee order. That was the moment the fog lifted. This wasn't about bandwidth. This was erasure, dressed up in beige corporate jargon. And I was just supposed to smile and disappear while he danced across the finish line in my shoes. So I did what any sideline strategist with 2 decades of experience, a petty streak, and a Google Drive folder labeled "Oh hell no" would do. I started documenting every file version, every email where my name was scrubbed from the CC list, every calendar invite that somehow skipped me but included Nathan D. Personal Gmail, yeah, that one raised an eyebrow. I kept a private tracker in Notion labeled Sable Shenanigans, and with every entry my suspicion inched toward certainty. And that certainty carried a familiar taste. Coppery, bitter, a slow simmering rage that I'd felt once before. And my old roommate pawned my guitar for rent money, and then gaslit me into thinking I never owned one. I wasn't about to let that happen again. Because here's the thing about being invisible. It gives you the best seat in the house to watch everyone else trip over the lies they think no one's looking at. And I was looking. Closely. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the break room smells like burned popcorn and broken dreams, and the coffee machine makes a sound like it's dying in Morse code. I was on my way back from the printer, where, by the way, someone had once again left 37 pages of cat memes queued up when I bumped into Jonah. He's one of our interns. Baby-faced, probably still thinks of work-life balance as a real concept. He grinned, all wide-eyed and caffeinated. "Hey Aaron," Nathan was bragging about that Sable deal earlier. Said it took personal charm and timing. Pretty badass. My jaw didn't drop. My face didn't twitch. I just nodded like I'd heard someone mention the weather. But inside, something cracked. Charm and timing? The man couldn't charm a stapler and had the timing of a drunk raccoon. That client didn't fall from the sky. I'd been courting Sable Enterprises for 8 months. I learned the CTO's kid's name, knew which snacks to order for meetings based on dietary restrictions, and once sat through a 2-hour Zoom on edge computing just to understand their tech roadmap. Nathan didn't even know how to pronounce their CEO's last name. After Jonah left, whistling some god-awful TikTok tune, I walked straight to my desk and pulled up the internal doc management system. I didn't even know what I was looking for, I just knew I'd find something. It didn't take long. 3 weeks ago, Nathan had accessed the master prospect file. The timestamp was clear, 10:32 p.m. on a Thursday. That file was mine. I created it. Labeled every slide, every research annotation, every behavioral analysis chart. And he had downloaded it, made a copy, and renamed it Sable Pitch Final V2ND. ND, Nathan's initials, like a dog peeing on someone else's hydrant and calling it landscaping. I kept digging. Buried in the admin panel was a changelog showing that 5 documents, including my original proposal deck, had been marked as obsolete in the system. That's how they quietly vanish from the searchable archive unless someone manually flags them for retention. It's not deletion, not officially. It's just digital disappearance with plausible deniability. My proposal deck, the one that earned us the first exploratory call with Sable, was gone. On paper, at least. But I'd made a PDF copy months ago, labeled it Pitch Sable Org Final. Seriously, this is it. PDF because I'm a realist. The arrogance of it all was what got me. He didn't even bother hiding the breadcrumbs. He thought I wouldn't look, or worse, he thought I wouldn't matter. You ever feel that slow burn of suspicion melt into something harder? Something like clarity dipped in contempt? That's where I landed, because it wasn't just credit he wanted. It was control, ownership. If this deal closed and he'd let it, he'd ride that wave straight into a director title, maybe VP next fiscal. Meanwhile, I'd be the background static in his origin story. The woman who helped with some early research. And no one would question it, not if I didn't speak up, not if I let it slide. But I wasn't going to scream. Screaming is for people who don't have receipts. I started a new folder that night, not on our servers, on a flash drive. The old school kind, metal casing, dangling from my keychain like a quiet threat. In it, every file version, every calendar log, every time-stamped edit from my original deck, along with screenshots of his downloads, archive flags, and Slack messages where he conveniently forgot to loop me in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was strategy. And I was about to become the variable Nathan didn't account for. Nathan caught me in the hallway like he was ambushing a deer in hunting season, overly cheerful, too eager, and carrying a manila folder like it was holy scripture. "Hey Aaron, got a quick thing for you," he said, glancing around as if anyone gave a damn what we were whispering about. "Need you to wrap up the Sable contract. You've got the best rapport with them." Rapport. That's what we were calling it now. Not months of groundwork, not late-night research calls, not customizing our pitch deck to mirror their boardroom politics. Just rapport, like I'd smiled pretty and patted the client on the head until they signed. I played it cool. Nodded, of course, I said, anything to help. He handed me the folder like it might explode. Everything's basically done. Legal's already reviewed. Just need your finesse on the final call and signature process. You know, smooth things out. Smooth things out. Jesus. I took the folder and didn't even look at it until I was back at my desk. It was too light. Maybe 10 pages total. The real contract was supposed to be at least double that, and this one had so many black bars and redactions it looked like an FBI file on Bigfoot. The IP section, the very heartbeat of any tech consulting deal, was barely a paragraph. No definitions, no ownership breakdown, no language about post-delivery control, just some hand-wavy nonsense about third-party vendor coordination subject to internal agreements. That was the first flag. The second was the clause labeled 6.3, which referenced external stakeholder entities as per Appendix D. There was no Appendix D. In fact, there were no appendices at all. Just a line in the footer that said prepared by ND. Not legal, not contracts, just Nathan. Like he was trying to cosplay as a compliance officer and forgot the part where people read this stuff. I stared at the folder for a full 5 minutes, willing it to explain itself. Then I emailed a copy to Marissa, a friend in legal who owed me a favor from when I helped her clean up a disaster on the Paxson account last year. I marked it confidential, added a note. Off the record, does this look reviewed to you? Her reply came 12 minutes later. Short answer, no. Long answer, this is either a first draft or someone's trying to launder something shady through an unapproved template. Want me to escalate? I typed back, not yet. Just needed a gut check, appreciate you. Then I pulled up our internal contract library and did a side-by-side comparison. The difference between this one and the standard SOW template was like comparing a Lego instruction sheet to a building permit. Whole sections were missing: compliance, IP custody, indemnity triggers, and most critically, the audit trail of vendor registration. But the language that really caught my eye was in Section 8.2. All IP deliverables will be managed via a designated holding structure until final project closeout. Holding structure. Not client ownership, not consultant IP retention. Just a generic, vague placeholder. I ran a keyword search on the company intranet. That phrase, designated holding structure, popped up exactly twice. Once in an archive pitch doc for an old partnership that never closed, and once in a side contract Nathan authored during a small dev handoff last year. That contract had been quietly pulled back after finance flagged it for lacking oversight. I remembered the whisper campaign that followed, how Nathan spun it as a one-time miscommunication. Now it looked a hell of a lot more like a practice run. I closed the folder, locked my screen, and stared out the window. The city looked smug in the afternoon light. Buildings stacked like spreadsheets, cars moving like emails on roads paved with promises nobody reads. Nathan had just handed me his smoking gun and asked me to pull the trigger. But I wasn't going to shoot blindly. No, I was going to line up every shot until the moment it counted. And when it landed, it wouldn't just sting, it would bury him. The moment I saw my own signature on a contract I never signed, something inside me didn't just break, it calcified. It was late, almost 8:45 p.m. Office half dark, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were tired of pretending to. I was supposed to be at home, nuking leftover lasagna and watching reruns of The Good Wife. Instead, I sat hunched over my monitor, cross-referencing the redacted contract Nathan handed me with the archive proposal logs. Something didn't add up. The formatting was too clean, like someone had taken a scalpel to the dock and stitched it back together with corporate jargon as the gauze. I opened the revision history. We use a cloud-based system for internal versioning. Nothing fancy, just enough to cover our asses if someone accidentally deletes something critical. I scrolled through the older saves and paused at one file marked Final Client Ready Aaron Sig PDF. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. Funny, I hadn't touched that contract in a month. I opened it. My digital signature sat proudly at the bottom next to the project code and client designation. Same font, same stylized initials. The only problem, I never signed it. I never even saw this version. My jaw clenched so tight I heard something click in my ear. I pulled up my DocuSign logs just to be sure. No record of that signature. No record of that file. But there it was, embedded in the PDF metadata, signed by Aaron D., timestamped 07/1410, 06 a.m. I checked my calendar for that day. Back-to-back meetings from 9 to noon, including one with Nathan. My laptop had been left unattended for a whopping 6 minutes while I grabbed a granola bar and came back to find him sitting at my desk, saying he just needed to grab a file real quick. Son of a bitch. That's when I remembered something. Our print station, the one next to the snack fridge, had an auto-login glitch. Nathan had mentioned it once, smugly laughing that it still hadn't fixed it. If you didn't log out manually, your session lingered. And if you saved credentials in browser, like half the department did because remembering passwords is apparently rocket science, they stayed cached. I hustled over and fired up the station. Chrome opened to our internal dashboard. I clicked on the file server link, still logged in as Nathan. I don't know if I was shaking or just vibrating with a kind of quiet wrath that could melt plexiglass. There it was. A hidden folder buried 2 layers deep. Resources Client Docs. Alt Docs. The period before the folder name is a cheap trick. It keeps it invisible to casual search, but not to someone who knows where to look. Inside, a trove. Email threads between Nathan and Sable's procurement team, but not through his work email, through a personal Gmail account, nathndventures@gmail.com. That's not even subtle. It's like robbing a bank and handing them your loyalty card. Attached to one of the emails was a vendor intake form, half-filled, naming Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC as the subconsultant on file. I opened the LLC registration database. Registered 2 months ago. Owner, N.D., listed at a P.O. box in Jersey City. That's not even where he lives. It's just where you send things you don't want your wife to see. The vendor contract listed Lark Bridge as project support, with a 4.5% back-end cut of all closed deals involving cloud migration strategy. Which, surprise, was exactly what Sable needed. He wasn't just cutting me out of the credit. He was siphoning company work into a shell company with a payout clause and laundering it through the backdoor using my name. That wasn't betrayal. That was fraud. It was happening under the noses of a half-asleep executive team too busy praising thought leadership to notice the dead fish smell under their floorboards. I copied everything. Emailed nothing. Downloaded the files onto my personal drive, encrypted the folder, and locked it in my own cloud vault with a key that only 3 people on Earth could guess. My first dog's name, my mother's favorite wine, and the year I almost quit corporate life for a food truck in Vermont. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about precision. If Nathan wanted to play chess, fine. But he was about to learn what happens when you think the pawn in glasses doesn't know how to flip the damn board. I didn't storm into legal with evidence in one hand and righteous fury in the other. That's amateur hour. You don't corner a snake while it's still coiled, you draw a chalk circle around it and wait for it to twitch. So I played dumb. I drafted a message to the risk and compliance liaison we all called Robot Dana behind her back, because she spoke like her soul had been outsourced to an algorithm. Subject line, quick clause clarification, hypothetical scenario. Body text, hi Dana, working through some language in a potential contract for a cloud migration client. Quick question, hypothetically. If a non-registered vendor entity was inserted into a contract for internal support services, e.g., data handoff or design architecture, would that violate our indemnity coverage or trigger a policy review? Asking for cross-functional clarity, not an escalation. Appreciate your insight. I hit send. Waited, ate a stale granola bar, scrolled through a spreadsheet I didn't care about. Dana replied in 6 minutes flat. Hi Aaron, yes. The use of non-registered vendor entities within client contracts, even in support roles, represents a direct violation of both our indemnity protection clauses and our audit compliance policies. In the event of a claim or audit, such arrangements would void coverage and could trigger internal review under Board Directive 11.2b. Please let me know if this is a live case or a thought experiment. Best, Dana trigger words, void coverage, internal review board directive, like music, but the kind of music you only play when you're setting the stage for someone's career obituary. I stared at the email and just breathed, not because I was scared, because I was ready. I opened the original contract, not Nathan's corrupted Frankenstein draft, the master doc, the one that still had my fingerprints on the bones. I created a new addendum, titled it Vendor Oversight Disclosure. Clause 6.3 Clarification. Wrote it in the driest, most boring legalese I could muster. Any deliverables outlined in Section 6.3 of this agreement, if conducted via third-party or auxiliary support structures, must be disclosed per policy 11.2b and registered within the company vendor intake framework before execution. Noncompliance may trigger indemnity policy suspension. I slipped that addendum into the tail end of the document, quiet, surgical, tucked between signature lines and the arbitration clause, like a tripwire hidden in tall grass. Next, I updated the contract metadata, timestamped the version, noted a quiet revision in the changelog, and uploaded the new version to the shared drive under the expected name, Sable Contract Final Q3v4, docx. Same name Nathan would search for. Same file path. Just one very sharp, invisible hook embedded inside. Then I went further. I created a second file. Looked exactly the same, except it was the version he had tried to push through. With the forged signature, the vague designated holding structure nonsense, and that quietly damning vendor clause. I renamed it Sable Backup Draft Refonly docx and uploaded it to a private folder only I could see. Why? Because when people get caught, they panic. They delete, overwrite, scrub history like digital janitors. But this time, when the panic started, there'd be a full mirror copy, and it wouldn't be me who was unprepared. I left the office that night calm, not triumphant, just clean, the way a surgeon feels after pulling the last stitch and tossing their gloves in the bin. Nathan still thought he was running the show, still sending me cheerful little Slack messages like, "Thanks again for helping smooth this out, Aaron. You're the glue here." Smiling face with smiling eyes. I smiled back. Typed, of course. Just making sure it sticks, because glue's funny like that. Sometimes it binds. Sometimes it rips when you pull too hard. Nathan stopped by my desk the Friday before the leadership sync like he was handing out cruise tickets. Leaned on the partition, wearing that smug half-smile that makes women in open offices clench their teeth and HR policies go dusty. "Heads up," he said, voice dipped in faux camaraderie. "You're looped into the leadership meeting next week. Big update on Sable. No pressure, just be ready to say thanks when the deal gets mentioned." I tilted my head like I was absorbing a compliment, not a warning. "Oh," I said sweetly. "Should I bring the file for review?" He waved it off like I'd offered to alphabetize his dirty laundry. "Nah, it's locked. Just optics, really. We close the loop." You nod, execs clap, everyone moves on. "You know the dance?" I nodded. "Sure, Nathan, I'll bring the file." He winked, then wandered off toward the espresso machine to rehearse his acceptance speech in front of the frothing wand. But I didn't move, not yet. I sat very still, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, mind running a clean systems check. I knew what he was planning, a public coronation. Take the win, scrub the risk, leave me smiling in the background like a loyal footnote. That was fine. He wanted optics. It was going to get a damn slideshow. I spent the weekend printing. Not emails, not revenge rants, just paper. Cold, dated, cross-reference paper. 2 binders. One labeled Sable Contract executed internal. The other Sable Contract altered draft ND. Identical covers, very different contents. Nathan's version was a corpse in a tuxedo, looked formal, smelled like fraud. My version was clean, data matched, signatures valid. The disclosure clause nestled right where legal needed it to be. A full audit trail of file history, vendor intake documentation, even the innocuous email to Dana from Risk, just in case anyone wanted to argue about context. I printed a third thing, too. A 1-page executive summary with 3 bullet points and a footnote, because execs love bullet points and hate footnotes, which is why the footnote included the line, "Vendor Entity Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC does not appear in approved database records as of this publication date." Monday came. I dressed like I was heading to a funeral with catered coffee. Navy blazer, loose hair, no jewelry, professional but forgettable. Let him shine, let him sweat. The best bait is the one that smiles back at you. The meeting room was all glass and fake greenery. 12 executives, 3 consultants, 1 CFO who hadn't blinked since 2019. Nathan strolled in last, carrying nothing, wearing everything. Confidence, cologne, and that recycled story about how he just knew Sable was the one. I slipped into my seat with both binders in a plain black bag and placed the one labeled executed gently on the table in front of me. Nathan caught my eye, raised his eyebrows, then gave a small nod like, "Good soldier." The meeting droned on. Q2 projections, sales milestones, a slide about employee engagement that made me want to set something on fire. Then it came. Before we close, Nathan said, standing up like he was accepting an award, "I'd like to recognize a huge win for our team. The Sable Enterprises contract is officially closed and onboarding is already in motion. Massive thanks to everyone who supported this effort, especially Aaron, who really helped clean up the final details." He looked at me like I was supposed to nod, maybe even blush. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations, Nathan," I said. Then I unzipped the bag, pulled out the binder, and placed it in front of me, slow, deliberate, like a poker player revealing the river card. I thought it might be helpful to walk through the file for anyone who wants context. I added, voice casual. The room fell into that specific silence, the kind where no one wants to cough because they might miss the sound of a career detonating. Nathan's smile twitched. Oh, that won't be necessary, he said too quickly. Everything's been sent through. I opened the binder anyway. Actually, I said, flipping to the tab with the disclosure clause, I noticed a small discrepancy in the IP language when I reviewed the original file. Just wanted to make sure everyone had the most recent version, especially legal. The clause about vendor entities was, let's say, interesting. A rustle of papers. The GC leaned forward, and Nathan finally blinked. The game had started, and I was holding every damn piece. Nathan began speaking like he was delivering a sermon at a church built entirely out of buzzwords. He stood at the head of the table, arms slightly outstretched, palms facing down, like he was baptizing us all in a shallow puddle of his own ambition. "We've come a long way this quarter," he began, pacing slow like a tech speaker who practiced in the mirror too long. "There were bumps, sure, but thanks to some bold direction and real-time agility, we not only stabilized. We won." No one was taking notes. Half the execs were checking phones under the table. The CFO looked like he was solving quantum equations on a legal pad. But Nathan, he was glowing, lit from within by the raw ego of a man convinced no one could see the trapdoor beneath his feet. "And I want to take a moment to spotlight one of our most important strategic acquisitions this quarter," he said, raising his voice just a hair. "Sable Enterprises. A 7-figure contract that positions us not only as a service provider, but as an industry thought partner." He let that phrase hang in the air like it had weight. Thought partner. I've seen post-it notes with more vision. Nathan continued, eyes flicking across the table like he was measuring applause before it even arrived. "This deal was personal," he said. "It took patience, precision, and a lot of trust building behind the scenes. But we got it done. And I'd like to thank Erin Daniels, who helped in the final stretch, really stepped in and played her part like a true team player." I smiled. No teeth. Just the kind of expression you wear when you're watching a man build his gallows out of recycled talking points. "Congratulations," I said softly. Then I reached down, unzipped the side of my bag, and slid the black binder onto the table like it was just another report. The cover made a soft thunk as it landed. Nathan's smile twitched. He glanced at it, then glanced at me. The air shifted, just a hair. You know that feeling right before lightning cracks, like the room is holding its breath? "I brought the finalized file," I said, tapping the binder once. "Figured if we're all celebrating, we should make sure legal and compliance have the most updated copy." The general counsel, who hadn't spoken all morning, perked up like someone had just whispered the word liability. He reached across the table, fingers already flipping open the cover. "Appreciated," he murmured, scanning the index. "Is this the one with the disclosure addendum?" Nathan blinked. "Disclosure?" I tilted my head innocently. "Oh, the note regarding vendor protocol," I said. "Clause 6.3? Legal flagged it last week. There was some confusion around third-party support structures and IP custody. I included the email chain in the appendix." A few more heads turned. One of the directors, Paula, sharp as nails and twice as deadly, leaned in and started flipping pages. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, this isn't the version I saw in the summary brief." "That's because the summary used a draft Nathan prepared," I said, still calm. "This is the executed version. Time-stamped. Includes the audit trail, updated IP clause, vendor registry note, and the compliance disclosure." The flipping sound grew louder. More pages turned. The CEO, who until now had been multitasking with one AirPod in, slowly removed it. "Erin," he said evenly, "are you saying the brief we were shown last week didn't include this disclosure?" Nathan laughed too loud, too fast. "It's just a formatting issue," he blurted out. "I mean, we were working on a live document. I must have sent an earlier draft. You sent the draft with Erin's digital signature on it," Paula interrupted, her tone turning surgical. "The one she never signed. That's in the appendix too, page 28. The room went still. I didn't gloat, didn't move. I just kept my hands folded on the table and let the silence tighten around his neck like a silk noose." Nathan looked at me, not with anger, with dawning horror. Because in that moment, he finally realized what I'd done. He thought I was the support role, the backstage help, the woman who smiled and vanished. But what I handed him was the script, and he'd just read it straight into his own funeral. The general counsel adjusted his glasses like he was about to dissect a corpse, not a contract. He turned to Nathan, binder open, one finger tapping the page like a metronome counting down to implosion. "Nathan," he said, tone all gravel and steel, "this vendor line, the payment structure references an entity not listed in our master vendor registry. Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC, you want to clarify that for us?" Nathan's mouth opened, and stalled like an old car in a winter ditch. "Oh, that's probably just a placeholder," he said quickly. "You know, boilerplate. I think legal pulled it from an old draft." "I am legal," the GC replied flatly. More paper rustled. The CFO flipped ahead. "It's listed in 3 places. Support role, IP handoff, and audit support. None of those went through intake. And there's a payment schedule." "I mean, I didn't submit that version," Nathan stammered. "That was Erin's draft, right?" "Erin, that was the version you had me review?" I tilted my head. No smile now, just the cold stare of a woman who kept every receipt and memorized the timestamps. "No," I said calmly. "That version has my signature, but I never signed it. That's why page 28 includes metadata and a screenshot of my login history. The original file was modified at time I wasn't logged in. It's the only version where Lark Bridge Holdings appears. Paula looked up from the binder. You forged her signature? Nathan's face drained. I wouldn't say forged, the general counsel cut him off. I just did. The CEO leaned forward, voice low. Nathan, what is Lark Bridge Holdings? And there it was, the moment. I could have let it hang. Watched him scramble like a trapped rat under fluorescent lights. But no, this wasn't about theater. It was about clarity. So I spoke, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. You might want to ask him about Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC, I said, turning toward the CEO. Because it's not in our vendor registry. But it is registered to a P.O. box in Jersey City. Same street his personal LLC used back in 2022 for a short-lived dev consultancy. And the email coordinating with Sable's procurement? That's not from his company account. It's from nathndventures@gmail.com. A sound escaped Nathan, part denial, part whimper. The GC's eyes widened slightly. He pulled out his phone. This just escalated to audit, he muttered. The CFO stood, quietly, like he didn't want to disturb a burial in progress. Nathan reached across the table toward the binder. This is all being blown out of proportion. Don't touch that, the GC snapped. You're done touching things. The CEO exhaled slowly, then turned to me. Aaron, you said there's an audit trail? I nodded. Full version history, access logs, duplicate backups. I've included a flash drive in the back pocket of the binder, along with the email chain with risk from last week. Compliance has already seen the language. There's a note from Dana in their flagging indemnity risks. Tension thickened like smoke. No one moved. Nathan finally slumped back in his chair, fingers twitching on the table, face pale and gleaming with sweat under the overhead lights. The room was watching him, colleagues, execs, people who'd once nodded along to his grandstanding, now seeing him for what he was, a man who thought fraud could wear a blazer and walk unnoticed. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, and in that silence you could feel everything shifting. Power, reputation, consequence, and I didn't say another word because there was nothing left to say. The general counsel stood first. We're pausing here, he said to the room, but it was directed squarely at the panic sweat pooling under Nathan's collar. This goes directly to internal audit. I'm alerting compliance. We'll reconvene after preliminary review. The CEO turned, not with anger, but something colder, disappointment laced with calculation. Nathan, he said, voice low but firm, please step out. We'll follow up once legal completes the internal briefing. Nathan looked around like he was searching for a parachute in a locked elevator. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No one looked back at him. Not even Paula, who used to share bagels with him on Thursdays. Not even the junior exec who once called him a visionary during an offsite at that sad little golf resort. Nathan stood slowly, one hand on the back of his chair, the other still twitching toward the binder like he thought he could unflip those pages with enough willpower. Thanks, everyone, he muttered. No one replied. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded more final than any gavel I've ever heard. The room stayed still for a few long seconds. Then the GC gathered the binder, closed it with surgical precision, and slid it under his arm like he was carrying evidence straight to the vault. Within the hour, IT revoked Nathan's account access. His badge was deactivated before he even cleared the elevator. A compliance lockout alert popped up in the internal system at 3:41 p.m. HR sent a meeting request titled simply offboarding procedures for the following morning. And I went back to my desk like it was any other Tuesday. 30 minutes later, the VP of Strategy stopped by my cubicle. Quiet, low profile. No fanfare. Aaron, she said. The board's reviewing Nathan's accounts and his pipeline. We'd like to offer you a transitional leadership role, client relations, and strategic partnerships. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.